Well, thanks again for being with us. Welcome to Joe Knows. We're talking about marriage and relationships, and I've titled this series Two Become One. That's the title of my book, and I'm sure you're going to see a picture of it somewhere during this talk and the other ones. So what I like to do now is I've talked to you about the relationship counseling I do, and now I want to go into, I break up my book in 4 parts. There are 10 sessions in 4 parts, and today I want to talk about part 1, and I've titled it Understanding Each Other. So when you're in a relationship, when you're married, you really need to understand where that person is coming from, how that person is wired, and amazingly, many couples don't understand that. They can describe what the person is like, but they don't have an objective way of qualifying in such a way that they can understand it and learn how to live skillfully with each other. So I try to help couples to understand each other, and there are 2 things we focus on that help us to do this. And the first session is we cover what I call expectations. Okay, so what is an expectation? Well, I want to give you the simplest version of an expectation. It's something you expect. Okay, now I know I'm using the same word to describe, to give a definition, but that's really the best way to do it in this case. Because an expectation is not something you hope for, it's not something you're dreaming of, it's not a hope, a desire, it is something you expect. So it involves all those things I just mentioned, but it's stronger. So here would be an example of an expectation. You have the expectation that when you go to work, you get paid, correct? And if you go to work and at the end of the pay period you don't get paid, you are not so happy, right? In fact, you wouldn't go because you have an expectation that you get paid. People have expectations, okay? Things that they're expecting are going to take place in their marriage. And unfortunately, oftentimes they don't communicate those expectations. They have them, they're thinking it's going to happen, but they haven't let their partner know. And other times, not only are they not communicated, but sometimes they're not even realistic. So in the first session, what I try and get couples to do is to uncover the expectations that they're bringing into marriage. Because here's the deal. If you have an expectation when you work, you get paid, and if you don't get paid, you're going to be disillusioned, to say the least, then many couples get married and have these expectations of things that are going to happen, and when those things don't happen, they're disillusioned, to say the least, disappointed. And that's why for many couples who go into marriage unprepared, the first year of marriage is the most difficult, because that's when many of their expectations that they had, they recognize and realize those expectations are not going to be fulfilled, and they have to make that adjustment. So what I try to get couples to do in that first session is sit back and think about the things that, not that they're hoping for and dreaming for, those are important, but I'm looking for the things that they're expecting to take place in marriage, and we get them out and we evaluate. I ask the 2 questions, okay? So the person tells me their expectation, and I'll say to the partner, did you know that? And oftentimes they say, no, I didn't know that. And I'll say, well, do you think that's realistic? And a lot of times the passive partner will say, oh yeah, that's realistic. I say, time out, wait a second. She said that you'll never get, she has an expectation that you'll never raise your voice and get angry. Now, and maybe I know the person, I happen to know they struggle with anger. And I said, you just said that's realistic, that you'll never get frustrated and raise your voice and get angry, when I know that's an unrealistic expectation. Now, so we want to get the expectation out and then maybe adjust it to that you're going to try your best not to raise your voice when you get angry, and that's going to be an area you focus on and really growing. Now, that would be a realistic expectation. And by the way, there are some really funny ones that I've had. One of them was, I had a friend that was, he was a youth pastor, and he was about to get married, about 6 weeks away, and we were with a group of other youth pastors in my youth pastor days, and we asked him if he had any questions, and he wanted to know how we, as youth pastors, as married youth pastors, how we find time to get our work done. We had no idea what this guy was talking about, and then he said this: I thought I'm expecting to have sex 3 times a day, And that's why I'm wondering, you guys are doing that, obviously. He was assuming that we were doing that. How do you find time to get your work done? Now, that is one of the most outlandish expectations I've ever heard. But here he is going into marriage with that expectation. Now, those of us that are married, we know it doesn't work that way. But I asked him, I said, does your wife, soon-to-be wife, know that you're expecting that? And he said, I assume that she does. And I think it was safe to assume she didn't. I had another situation where a woman about to get married, she had the expectation that her good old boy, Texas, typical man, kind of a, hard kind of a guy, she had the expectation that he would meet, this guy would meet all of her emotional needs without her ever having to tell him what they were. And I was like, whoa, that is a whopper of an expectation. I asked him if he knew that, and I think he said, what? I don't even think he was listening, if you get the idea of the profile. And these are things that it's really good to deal with them before you get married, so you can evaluate them, make sure that it's communicated, and that you've made them to where they actually are realistic and can be experienced and can actually be worked on. So we talk about expectations. The second session, again, this is under the umbrella of understanding each other. We talk about the differences in people. And I want a couple to learn to understand and then appreciate the differences. Sometimes we go into marriage and we think that the way we are is the right way and the best way. And we are trying to subconsciously change our spouse to be into being us, because we feel like the way we are is right and the way they are, it can be improved. Okay, and that's not a good way to go into a relationship, not a marriage relationship, because people don't change, people grow. So saying that you want a person to change, and I'll explain this to you in a second, I want them to change and I want them to be hardwired like I am, that's an unrealistic expectation. Because if a person is an introvert and you're an extrovert and you want that person to become extroverted, that's unrealistic, because they're hardwired as an introvert. And what a couple needs to do as they enter into marriage is understand who that person is, and then make sure that's the person they want to spend their lives with. And then there may be, an introvert can come out of themselves a little bit, but to expect an introvert become an extrovert is unrealistic and very dangerous. So what we do is we talk about differences in family of origin, which plays into how a relationship's going to go. Then we talk about gender differences, which there are generalizations that some apply and some don't. But we really focus on temperaments, personality. And I take couples through a talk. In fact, they become experts on the 4 temperaments. I use 4. There are lots of ways that these things are described, and you can have 16 different things, the Enneagram and different things. But I use the simple, in a marriage relationship, I want to just narrow it down to the 4, and it would be the sanguine, the outgoing, life of the party, the choleric, which is the achiever. Those are both extroverted. And then we move into the melancholic, which is the feeler, and the phlegmatic, which is the laid back and easygoing, and those are the introverted. And what I do is I help couples become experts in these 4 temperaments, and I ask them to try to define their primary and secondary temperament and the primary and secondary temperament of their partner. And when we come to an agreement on that, we basically have an understanding of their temperament, and that begins to help them to understand, even anticipate the way that they are hardwired and the way that they act and behave. It actually helps me when I know their expectations, and then I have an understanding of their temperament. Now I can begin helping them to understand how to deal with life together in such a way that they're not trying to change, they're being themselves, they're growing, but they understand who the person is that they've married or they're thinking about marrying, and they can really have a relationship in which they experience oneness. It requires skill, and having that background really helps a lot. So I hope this is helpful to you. And we're going to begin next week. We're going to talk about, I'm not exactly sure I'm going to break it up, because the second part of the book is on resolving conflict, and I do 3 sessions on resolving conflict, and we'll see how I break that up. But I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. Hope you're enjoying this, and God bless you. Your relationships, they can be better if you work at it. See you next time.